Throw the ball. Come on, throw the ball.
Throw the ball.
Throw the ball.
Throw the ball. Throw the ball.
Throw the ball, George. Throw the ball, George. Throw the ball.
In sports culture, it's not just that a certain kind of manhood gets defined and privileged and naturalized, but that this normalization in turn defines those who fall outside this dominant ideal as somehow unathletic, unworthy of sport, outside of its sacred space, making it hostile territory for those who don't fit, and making the history of sport in the United States a sort of window into larger social struggles for equality and justice, like the struggle for women's equality.
How do they do it? Where do they find all that energy? That seemingly inexhaustible store of pep and ginger.
When schools began offering physical education in the late 1800s, the prevailing belief was that women were too fragile for such physical exertion. Respected scientists even argued that sports would make women infertile, sex-crazed, or just plain insane, pretty much everything short of growing a tail. Then, along came the bicycle.
Bicycling is a lot of fun, good exercise, and a fine means of transportation.
As absurd as it seems now, the idea of women riding bicycles was a profound threat to the male social order because it would force women to take off their corsets. The so-called expert scientists howled that riding a bike would implode a woman's uterus or give her what they called, quote, the bicycle face, which was marked by peculiarities including pale complexion and an anxious expression. This was all part of a larger attitude toward women and physical activity. For many, women's sports were considered unnatural and unsightly, even unfeminine and downright un-American. Take basketball. The sport was invented in 1891, and women started playing it right away. They were rough and aggressive, despite having to wear dresses on the court. Alarmed that these players were becoming too manly, organizers instituted new rules that actually prohibited physical contact and any effort to hinder the shooter. And just like that, what started as scrappy and fun was made dainty and dull, all in the name of keeping men manly and women womanly. Or take running. Surely women would be allowed to run, right? I mean, it's a no bicycle face, no contact sport. So what could be the problem? The women's 800 meters debuted at the 1928 Olympics, but at the finish, some of the runners fell to the ground to catch their breath. Perfectly reasonable, right? They were winded. We see this with men all the time, too. But for some reason, this was considered so unladylike, it caused an international scandal. Deeming the sport too strenuous for the frail female form, Olympic officials promptly banned the women's 800 meters for 30 years. 30 years! The idea stuck, so much so that one member of the International Olympic Committee would actually say in 1952 that he hoped to eliminate women's track and field competition altogether from the Olympics so that we all might be, as he put it, spared the unaesthetic spectacle of women trying to look and act like men. In 1953, Pulitzer Prize-winning sports columnist Arthur Daly of the New York Times said that eliminating women from the Olympics was, quote, a great idea, writing that there's nothing feminine or enchanting about a girl with beads of perspiration in her alabaster brow, the result of grotesque contortions in events totally unsuited to female architecture. Adding that any self-respecting schoolboy can achieve superior performances to a woman champion. And that's the point. Men like Arthur Daly and those on the International Olympic Committee weren't only trying to prevent women from harm, they were also defending a notion of manhood based on physical superiority. This all changed in the 1960s and 70s when women began to organize. They broke out of traditional gender roles and took on responsibilities outside of the home. It was called the women's movement, and the world has never been the same since.
There's another slogan that women have for this strike, which says sisterhood is powerful.
It took people who were willing to break the rules to change them. And this struggle reflected itself in electric fashion in the world of sports in the 1960s, on battlefields as unlikely as the Boston Marathon.
The race is 26 miles, 385 yards from Hopkinton to Boston. This is normally an all-male contest.
Most believed that women just couldn't handle the distance. But in 1967, a woman by the name of Kathy Switzer registered as KV Switzer and got into the race.
Race officials are somewhat jolted when a girl appears. Wearing number 261, she's listed in the program with letter K for first name, second name Switzer.
5 miles into the race, one of the marathon directors actually jumped off a truck to forcibly remove Switzer from the course, yelling, "Get the hell out of my race!" But the men running with her fought him off. For them, Kathy Switzer had every right to be there. And for them, the Boston Marathon wasn't about proving male supremacy, pitting boys against girls. It was about people running a race. When the pictures from the marathon were transmitted across the globe, the world saw two opposing models of masculinity: the violence and paranoia of the marathon director versus the strength and solidarity of the other male runners. And at the center of it all, the resolute focus of Kathy Switzer. In that moment, sports bridged the gender divide and gave the world a glimpse into what was possible. But maybe the most influential example of the fight for women's equality in American sports was embodied in the great Billie Jean King.
Some fellows have such a bad ego trip that it's not worth it. I have enough trouble beating the little old ladies.
King is widely regarded today as one of the greatest women athletes of all time. But she was also important because she was really the first athlete to put feminism right at the center of sports.
Billy, do you mean to say you think I put women down? Is that what you're saying that I'm doing all the time?
Yes, I do. I don't think you give us credit for having any brains at all, or any logic. You know, that's fine, because if that's where you're at, then that's okay. It's right on
well, I
for
get
you.
along very well with a lot of girls.
When we think of politics in Billie Jean King today, what a lot of us remember is her famous Battle of the Sexes match against Bobby Riggs in the early 1970s.
The male is king, the male is supreme. I've said it over and over again. I still feel that way. Girls play a nice game of tennis for girls.
Bobby Riggs plays Mrs. Billie Jean King on a tennis court in Houston tonight. It's a match that's being billed as an epic battle of the sexes.
In front of a sold-out crowd at the Houston Astrodome, she beat the retired tennis star Bobby Riggs in straight sets in what remains one of the most watched television programs in the history of sports.
To change the world, you had to win.
I had to win. You're absolutely correct, Charlie.
And even though there's no doubting the importance of this event and the fact that it was a moment of tremendous symbolism, Billie Jean King's contributions to women's equality far transcend that one match.
I knew it was a platform. It was very important to me to win that match, to try to get people to maybe have a little bit a shift of their mindset that it's important to help girls and boys to be the best they can be.
Yes! Tennis has always been a country club sport, but Billie Jean King came from a working class background and grew up playing on public courts. And when she finally got into the game, she fought for pay equity every step of the way. She was the first ever president of the first ever women's sports union that organized women's tennis. And she was also the first prominent woman to ever be out of the closet.
Last Friday, facing what is certainly the most serious crisis of her career, 37-year-old Billie Jean admitted she had had a homosexual affair with her former aide, Marilyn Barnett.
The revelation had an immediate blowback, costing her a ton of prestige and money.
Billie Jean King's contract to make television ads for ER Squibb Company is not being renewed. The New York Daily News quotes a company official as saying she was too strong a personality, that she was overpowering the product. He denied that the company's decision had anything to do with Mrs. King's disclosure of a lesbian relationship.
It would take her years to win back her credibility, but she was somebody who never shied away from who she was and what she believed. The fact that these women refused to accept the restrictive gender roles assigned to them, and the fact that their refusal sparked such widespread resentment and backlash from panicked men, is a crucial part of the history of sports and of this country. The result has been the full-scale transformation of sports, so that today we see an explosion of women's participation. A transformation that wouldn't have been possible without the political struggle that led to Title IX.
It all goes back to Title IX. The 1972 law gave young women equal opportunity in education and sports.
Before Title IX, roughly 1 out of 35 girls played some form of sports. Today, that number is 1 out of 3. This is amazing.
You're poised and ready, unable to make a sound. Your hands are sweaty as you look down. You're running already when you hit the ground.
It's a reform that has literally changed the lives of tens of millions of women. But you wouldn't know that by looking at our sports media. According to a series of studies done by sociologists Michael Messner and Cheryl Cookie, the major networks have pretty much stopped covering women's sports altogether. Coverage of women's sports on TV news and highlight shows has nearly evaporated since 1989. From a high of 9% of airtime devoted to women athletes in 1999 to an unbelievable 1.6% in 2009. Women's sports now get 5% less airtime than 20 years ago. And as with so much else in sports culture, ESPN the magazine might as well be a men's locker room. In the last 5 years, female athletes have appeared on 6 ESPN covers. 6. That means that the covers were men only 95% of the time. And in 2001, the only women to appear on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and this is a weekly magazine now, were the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders from 1972. You gotta be kidding me.
The Best Damn Sports Show period on FSN is brought to you by Hooters.
The major networks are more likely to promote women as swimsuit models, cheerleaders, or props for a beer commercial than serious athletes.
A bikini fashion show in the snow, ladies. How was that? Fun?
Cold. So cold. Cold, yeah. Chilly.
Huh?
Chilly.
This fixation on women's bodies is no different from Playboy's Women of the Olympics issue, or NBC's primetime coverage of women's beach volleyball, a sport that just so happens to be played in tiny bikinis on synthetic beaches.
You know, we want to go down as one of those teams that no one ever forgets.
Athletes are no longer the focus. They're just another excuse to sell women's bodies to male viewers.
June heats up on ESPN.
And as it turns out, this gendering of athletic achievement presents a problem, not just for women who play sports, but also for the men who don't measure up to the sports culture's masculine ideal.
Watch it, jerk. Shut up, idiot. Moron. Scab eater. Butt sniffer. Pus licker. Fart smeller. You bob for apples in the toilet. And you like it. You play ball like a girl.
As any guy who spent any time at all in the jock universe will tell you, from childhood forward, 2 great fears keep boys and men in line. One is the nightmare of being called a girl.
What's wrong with y'all? Y'all play like some little girls. Y'all like y'all never played football before.
Tom Brady, if you're listening, take off the skirt and put on some slacks. Toughen up.
Wow. And beyond this kind of sexism, the second great fear that binds the jockocracy together is homophobia.
Even though we may think it's not a big deal in our society, the reality is there's still a lot of homophobia that exists. In sports, it's about a macho of an environment as we have to offer in American culture.
Like sexism, homophobia is everywhere in sports. So you have someone like John Smoltz, future Hall of Fame pitcher, who compared gay marriage to bestiality by saying, "What's next, marrying an animal?" Or repeat offender Jeremy Shockey of the Saints, who said that he wouldn't stand for having a gay guy on his team because they're gonna be in the shower with us.
It looks amazing.
As with sexism, this kind of homophobia functions to maintain a certain ideal of normal manhood by dehumanizing other people. And in the process, it keeps gay athletes in the closet. So it shouldn't be any surprise that to date, no active player in the big 3 men's sports, baseball, basketball, football, has dared admit he was gay. John Amici played for 7 seasons in the National Basketball Association. Then in 2007, he became the first former NBA player to come out of the closet.
But if we end up being open and accepting of homosexuals in sports, will we not then begin to become open and accepting of homosexuals in other walks of life? I mean, I'm just saying it's a slippery slope. You'll admit it's a slippery slope.
I'm hoping it's a very slippery slope.
Okay.
Yes, I'm hoping so.
By coming out, Amici joined the likes of baseball player Billy Beane and NFL offensive lineman Esera Tuolo. But all these guys waited until retirement to come out of the closet. Why is that? Well, let's consider how former NBA All-Star Tim Hardaway responded to Amici's announcement.
Boo! Well, I hate gay people, so I let it be known. I don't like gay people. I don't like to be around gay people. I don't, I'm homophobic. I don't like it. It shouldn't be in the world for that, or in the United States for it. So yeah, I don't like it.
The point again is that sports culture is shot through with political meaning and struggle. And unless we're content to stay quiet in the face of bullying, we should make it our goal to speak up and try to change things when sports culture reinforces backward political attitudes that hurt people for no good reason.
I think it's important for everybody to be treated with respect. Gay, lesbian, straight, whatever.
Martina Navratilova helped found It Takes a Team to fight homophobia in sports.
If that person sinks a three-pointer with 2 seconds to go when we're down by 2, I don't think you're going to care whether she's Jewish or black or gay or anything, or Southern or whatever. You just want to make sure that she makes the shot.
Hey, now I eat Oreos faster than you. I can eat Oreos faster than you.
Scott Fujita, the free-spirited defensive captain and starting linebacker for the 2010 Super Bowl champion New Orleans Saints, is not only the kind of guy who's more likely to razz an opposing player like Peyton Manning for the cookies he endorses than he is to call him a girl.
I told him the Oreo joke. I told him the Oreo joke. I don't think he liked it.
He's also the kind of guy who has the guts to speak up for gay rights in a hostile environment where it's not an easy thing to do.
There we go.
I interviewed Scott on my radio show and asked him why a straight guy married to a woman like him was willing to lend his public support to the National Equality March for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered rights, even though he knew full well that a lot of frightened straight guys would theorize that he must be gay. And here's what he had to say.
By and large, this country is past the point where the issue of gay rights and equality, it's past the point of debate. For me, in my small platform as a professional football player, I understand that my time, in the spotlight is probably limited, so I think the more times you have to kind of lend your name to the spotlight to a cause that you believe in, you should do that.
The fight for equality starts just like that, with a few good people daring to stand up to the crowd to overcome injustice. And the history of sports is in many ways the history of this fight.
And I guess what I'm really asking you is to, peel it away a little bit. Just tell me, why do you think it is? Is there still that much prejudice in baseball today?
No, I don't believe it's prejudice. I truly believe that they may not have some of the necessities to be, let's say, a field manager or perhaps a general manager. Why are black men or black people not good swimmers? Because they don't have the buoyancy.
I got to tell you, that sounds like the same kind of garbage we were hearing 40 years ago about players.
It turns out that not only male power, but white male power was so embraced as the athletic norm that the credibility of black athletes was thrown into as much question as the athletic abilities of women and gays, and in precisely the same ways. Beliefs in biological inferiority feeding a sense of athletic inferiority. Back in 1910, an African-American boxer named Jack Johnson